My name is Bleish. I'm a new resident of the Austin area. I came here from Missouri. I founded an organization in Missouri called the Liberty Restoration Project, and we focus on personal privacy as well as state sovereignty. And I became very much so involved in fusion center research after the Missouri Information Analysis Center in Missouri profiled me as a potentially radical violent militia member because of my political beliefs. So these fusion centers have a very intimate impact on my life, and that put me on a track of in-depth research. Our organization partnered up with TAG, and we've been traveling the country visiting fusion centers and speaking to people in their communities about fusion centers and how they can get involved with them. And thankfully, in Missouri, we were successful in having that report that I mentioned that profiled people like me who support various political ideologies. That was retracted, and we went through 4 legislative hearings with our state legislature in order to get this situation dealt with, and it's an ongoing process. We're still dealing with it up there. I have moved down here, but our organization is still focused on that. Unfortunately, no one's been held accountable for that. Yeah, the director of the Fusion Center, they lost their job, but they got moved to another department. They still have a taxpayer-funded position, and the repercussions of that document are still reverberating throughout the nation right now. So I want to speak to some concerns that I have with this fusion center moving forward today, and I want to ask that you all consider the gravity of the vote you will be making. If you do choose to move forward with this, I fear it is in haste, and I feel that you may regret that decision because the opportunity for even more scandal to rock the Austin area is huge. If you consider that in Arizona, we were told by their fusion center staff that if you're planning a rally in Arizona, they will run your name through a fusion center database with no criminal predicate, although criminal predicate is what they're supposed to be based upon, correct? The Maryland State Police, through their fusion center, entered 56 anti-war activist names into a database, a terror database. You have in Oklahoma, we visited them earlier this year, and they said that other than them, there were only 2 other fusion centers in the nation that had privacy policies that were accepted by DHS. So that shows you right there that, the privacy policy that y'all have been working on down here, that's a living document, and it may or may not be as constraining as some of the activists here originally thought, especially considering most fusion centers operate without one. And in the Seattle Fusion Center, there was an FBI analyst who was assigned there by the FBI, but he worked for the State Fusion Center, and he spent 2 years infiltrating an anti-war group to the point where he was managing their databases and sitting down intimately in their meetings. I'm not trying to say that anyone who works for the Austin Police Department or anyone here locally has bad intentions, but the fact of the matter is these fusion centers are riddled just completely with scandal after scandal after scandal, instances of fraud, abuse, misuse, and I think that you all, as the representatives of the people of this community, owe it to them to do them the service of properly vetting this fusion center before you move forward and potentially put people at risk. And it goes further than that. Not only was I profiled for my political beliefs by my government in my state, and I had to fight to have that retracted, but because of that fight, the Southern Poverty Law Center, an institution that does training for fusion center staff, now has my face and my name up on their website, a website that is designed to identify people who commit acts of violence and hate and who are racist, and that is not me at all. Those are the people who get paid by the DHS to train fusion center staff on how to identify potential threats. Is that what we want to be doing here in Austin? I'm moving down here. I came down here in February. I plan to be a long-term resident of Austin. I left one community that was treating me, I felt, very horribly because of my political beliefs through the use of their fusion centers. I don't want to come to another community like this. And when you consider that you guys do have no refusal weekends, where you do take blood from people forcibly, when you consider that just a week ago that grant application still was calling for the Fusion Center to assist in the implementation of rapid inoculations in the case of a mass crisis, It begs me to question, if you're willing to forcibly take something out of my body, how do I know you're not going to forcibly put something into my body? And I don't think that law enforcement or a fusion center have any role in that whatsoever. I want to feel safe around my law enforcement community, and I know that there are good people who work in the Austin Police Department. I've talked to many of them since I've moved down here. I know there's good people in the Missouri Police Department as well. But unfortunately, since 9/11, which keep in mind, it was the 9/11 Implementation Act of 2007 that gave legislative backing to DHS to start creating these fusion centers. I encourage you to check that out. That made the 9/11 Commission report. It gave it legislative backing. Now, when you talk to law enforcement, people who got involved in law enforcement after 9/11, these are people who either, for the most part, they were deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan. They're used to using facial recognition technology, iris scanners, types of technology that is not currently used here in these United States. But these are individuals who are over there learning to use this stuff on people who were not protected by the Constitution, particularly since the Patriot Act came around. And one of the things we discussed in Oklahoma, they're some good old boys. They grew up working in law enforcement before the typewriters, typewriters before computers, and all this technology is coming up around them. They said, well, we don't use all that technology. And what we brought to them was the question, what happens when some young kid who's been using this technology all over the globe takes your spot? Now, that question was answered when Ben and Kathy visited the Portland Fusion Center, and a young veteran had just accepted the position of Fusion Center Director, and he said to Ben and Kathy, in front of their privacy attorney, I thought I had a new toy. I was going to get to play with all this new technology and use it in all these creative ways, and they had a privacy attorney, basically like a leash on this guy. And I think that that is something we need to consider. Just because the people right here, right now, don't have the plans or intentions to use this fusion center in a negative way doesn't mean the people who come up after them won't. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing everything in our power to make sure that everyone is protected adequately from such potential abuses and misuse. Now, the last thing I'd like to leave you with is my concerns with any community that is tying themselves to the Department of Homeland Security. I'm sorry, but I find them to be an unconstitutionally operating department of the federal government, first of all. Additionally, if you consider that our country was founded on the principles of federalism, a decentralization of power, that is not what this fusion center would do. It would centralize information, it would centralize authority and power. If you consider that Sheriff Mack, when he took the Brady bill to the Supreme Court, they came down with a decision that said the federal government cannot commandeer state and local law enforcement for their bidding. Now, I don't consider this commandeering, I consider this bribery. Dangling money in front of a community saying, hey, we're going to give you all these bells and whistles, and we're going to share information with you. I find that completely inappropriate. I think that's completely contrary to the Constitution of the United States, and while they may not be commandeered, I believe that it's basically bribery. And when you consider that there are reports that have come from the Department of Homeland Security that have not been retracted, reports that call people like me a potential right-wing radical extremist, reports that say returning veterans should be considered threats, those documents will be sent to this fusion center, just like they're sent to fusion centers all across the country. Bear in mind, that report has not been retracted. Do you want to tie yourself to that? These fusion centers impact the lives of everyday citizens. I learned that the hard way. And I can give you story after story about the negative things that come from these fusion centers. There's positive things too. I understand communication is something that's needed between departments and agencies. I understand that. And I think there's a role for that. But the two things that I would ask of you all to consider: one, please take your time with this. Make sure that before you move forward, the people in your community are protected. I don't want to move from one state where I just got done dealing with the Fusion Center scandal to another city that, I'm sorry, but is already riddled with scandal. And I don't want you guys having the authority, and not you guys as individuals, but as an institution, having the authority to collect information and to track information and share information with DHS, with FBI, And some fusion centers share information with private companies and with foreign governments. I don't want that authority given to to an institution that is already proving that they cannot check themselves adequately. I think there are some problems that need to be dealt with here locally before we start centralizing even more power and more information in one place. So please, if you could, please consider taking your time on this and making sure that people's privacy is respected and that there aren't things that almost slip through, like the fact that $100,000 was allocated for a medical analyst. That did almost slip through, and if it wasn't for the diligence of the people in this room, it may have gone through. But the people here are working hard because they believe in this community, and they gave up an entire day. Some people were here with their kids from 10 a.m. to 5:30. These people care, and I hope that you all, through your voting today, show that you do too. The last thing I want to say before I walk away is just to consider that right now, we are funding our own oppression on the backs of generations that may or may not have the choice to live a day without surveillance cameras, retinal scanners, and they may not be able to have this choice because of the decisions that we are making today. I hope we choose wisely. Thank you.